Hello, and welcome back to another Sunday School lesson. This time we're in Enos through the Words of Mormon in the Book of Mormon, and it's titled, He Works in Me to Do His Will. So let's get started here. So the first up in Enos, we have essentially the longest prayer ever. That's not an official record, I'm just saying a very, very long prayer. It pretty much took all day for the prayer, and it's recorded in Enos. There are several attributes of this that I'll get into. So first and foremost, they point this out. The first thing says, a parent's words can have a lasting influence. And at the very beginning of it, Enos was out hunting, basically, and the words that his parents said to him, that his father told him, came back to him about the Lord and about prayer and so on. And so he just stops right there and starts to pray. And this is a valuable lesson, I think, for everyone. Parents, anyone who basically has to deal or interact with children, is that our words, not just parents, but parents in particular, can have a lasting impact on people around us. Children in particular, they will remember what we did, how we acted, and so on as they were being raised and grew. And yeah, it's just amazing how much the impact, how much it has on all of us. So kind of off topic, but one of my favorite games is BioShock 2. Great story, great game, but that's all beside the point. So throughout the game, you're basically, it's kind of complex, I won't get into it, but basically you're trying to rescue your daughter throughout the entire game. And you are confronted with many choices as the game progresses. It's, one of those complex systems, and, it's one of those games where your choices make a difference and it changes the ending. But when you get pretty much to the last level of the game, you discover that your daughter has been watching everything you've done throughout the entire game. And now she's going to model herself on however you behaved. And that's true. It's one of those great life lessons that you don't expect in a game, but suddenly shows up in a game. And it is very true. Our children will model themselves after us. If we're, jerks all the time, our children will be jerks. If we're decent, kind people, our children will be decent and kind. For the most part. But you know what? It's always better to err on the side of caution and be the sort of person that you'd want your child to grow up to be. So, leave it right there. So anyway, Enos said a lot of long prayers about his own salvation, the salvation of his people, the salvation of his enemies. And that's what his prayer was all about. And it was a long prayer. And he was pretty much sitting there praying most all of the day before he got any sort of response. And I think that's a very, very important thing for us to remember. God isn't always going to respond to us immediately. He's not at our beck and call. He's going to do not what we think is best, but what he knows is best. And sometimes having us wait is what's best for us. And so the lesson that comes with that is that we should always remember is that it happens not in our time, but in God's time. And that we have to be persistent, we have to be faithful, and we have to keep trying, even when it's super, super difficult to keep trying and keep going through these things. And I think that's my biggest takeaway from the lesson is, if we don't get immediate answers or things don't automatically work out for us, it's not because God doesn't care or not because he doesn't answer our prayers or any of those excuses that the world offers. It's because it's not being done in our time, but in God's time. And we should remember that and realize that, our timetable is pretty much meaningless next to God's timetable. And, yeah, just have the faith to keep going. And that can be difficult at times. But if we persevere, we can make it. So we're going to move on a little bit past this, and we're going to get into... There are two fairly big historical things that happen in this lesson. So first off, it's mentioned the people of Zarahemla are mentioned in this in these chapters in Omni. Now, we don't have a full history of the people of Zarahemla. We know that sometime around the same time that Lehi and his family came to the Americas, the people of Zarahemla did likewise. It's referenced that one of the people of Zarahemla may have been the descendant of the ruler of Judah. I'm not sure if that's actually confirmed in it, but it is referenced in the lesson, I believe. But I'm not sure if that's 100% accurate or if it could be one of those things. So it gives us more or less the same time frame that Lehi left Jerusalem. So just around then. They came to America. We don't know how. It's not really mentioned and so on. But they did not have, the brass plates and could not preserve their religion or their language. And so after, a few generations, this was, I think, about 200 years. I could be wrong. 1 to 200 years after Lehi left. After the Nephites came to the Nephites, Lamanites came to the American continent. So, it's somewhere between 4 and 8 generations had passed. We'll say about 6 generations probably. It gets complicated, I know. And completely lost their language. They didn't even recognize the other's language, and so people of Zarahemla were taught the language of let's see, what is the name of the guy? Ulek. Okay, no, it says in the lesson, I'm double checking the lesson here, that Mulek was one of the sons of Zedekiah, who was the king of Judah. So he was captured in Babylonia in about 587 BC. So that gives us a pretty much, a vague time frame of when they came to the land. So, yeah, the Nephites who found them caused that their language should be taught amongst them, and they, taught them, got them back to kind of the law of Moses, and, all the religion stuff was retaught to them. But it was also discovered that amongst these peoples that a man named Coriantumr had dwelt among them. Now, Coriantumr was a descendant of the brother of Jared. Now, much, much later in the Book of Mormon, we have a condensed record of the Jaredites who had come to the American continent shortly after the events at the Tower of Babel. And that was thousands of years earlier. So there was another group of people beforehand. So there was essentially 3 groups of people who came to the Americas. Well, two groups of people who came before the Nephites being the third group that came. First was the Jaredites, thousands of years earlier. The second, or maybe not before, but around the same time, was the people of Zarahemla. And finally, Lehi and his family were the third. So that is a long, complex history, but Coriantumr was pretty much the last known survivor of the Jaredites. After many wars, much tribulation of wars, and so on, he found his way back to the... he found himself amongst the people of Zarahemla and dwelt with them for, I believe it says 9 moons. So he dwelt with them for a small period of time, and we'll go into his history much, much later in the Book of Mormon, towards the end of the year, I would say. But yeah, that's kind of the history. So there are at least 3 groups of people we know of from the Book of Mormon who came to the American continent, before we basically have records of the American continent. The only record we really have is the Book of Mormon, and a lot of historians debate it. So we'll just leave it at that. Just as a point of interest, a lot of history there. So we also encounter the words of Mormon. So for those of you who don't know, Mormon was a prophet, and he was the one who basically put the Book of Mormon together. He compiled it from many ancient records that he had. Now, Words of Mormon kind of connect the different records that he had put together. So basically, pretty much most everything after Words of Mormon, starting with my mind just went blank on the names of the books. Mosiah, through the Book of Mormon, were written or rewritten, edited, I should say, and written down by Mormon. He put together the history. He added his own commentary and his own bits and pieces of the history up until, most of the Book of Mormon. I think the last 2 chapters were written by his son, and then the record of Ether and the Book of Moroni, his son Moroni, I should say, was compiled by Moroni. So that should give you a quick little look at it. Well, he had discovered, quite by accident, what is known as the smaller plates of Nephi. Now, we discovered much earlier that Nephi was inspired to create these smaller plates, and that had kind of more of his prophecies and so on. And after he had completed he completed what was 1st and 2nd Nephi, he passed the book on to his brother Jacob. There was limited space at that point on these plates, and for whatever reason, they did not want to add more plates to it. Maybe they couldn't, I don't know. But so after Nephi, we have the Book of Jacob, which is smaller, and then we have Enos, Jerome, and Omni, which was written by multiple. Well, Enos and Jerome wrote those 2 books. I believe Jerome was the only one who wrote Jerome. And there was, I think, about 5 different people wrote in the Book of Omni. Most of them in that book are a quick paragraph or 2, basically just to record that they had took it before the book was finally completed at the end of Omni. The name of the person who completed the Book of Omni, who recorded the words of the people of Zarahemla and so on, I forget his name, but that was kind of the end of the smaller plates of Nephi. Now, Words of Mormon basically historically connects the events in the smaller plate of Nephi to the rest of the books edited by Mormon. So it's kind of an introduction and explanation. It's kind of like, well, the metaphor that comes to mind is in the 1960s, there was a show called Doctor Who. It's still around a bit, but a lot of the 60s episodes are missing or destroyed. And one of the things they do is they create a linking narrative to explain what happens. They still have the audio recordings, but not the actual visual recordings on a lot of these. And what they have done is had a linking narrative created so that they can tell you what happens, what the sounds that are happening means, what's going on. Excuse me. And that's kind of what Mormon did. He basically said, okay, this takes you down to this historical time period. This is where, excuse me, the Book of Mosiah starts, and this is kind of what you need to know leading up to the events in Mosiah. So it's, historically speaking, it's basically serves as a connection between 2 separate records that were made at different times. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers that and the Words of Mormon. So the one thing I want to end this lesson on is something that was written. It's written several times in the Book of Mormon. I'm going to look it up and read it. It's said in different ways in the Book of Mormon. This is from the Book of Omni, and Omni verse 6. It's only one chapter. Says, "For the Lord would not suffer, after he had led them out of the land of Jerusalem, and kept and preserved them from falling into the hands of their enemies, yea, he would not suffer that the word should not be verified, which he spake unto our fathers, saying that, inasmuch as you will not keep my commandments, you shall not prosper in the land." So this like I said, this same sentiment, same thing is repeated several times. Basically, if you keep the commandments of God, you will prosper in this land, speaking of America. If you do not keep the commandments of God, you will not prosper in the land. And it's repeated numerous times in the Book of Mormon. Now, one of the things I've learned from a lot of gospel studies, a lot of reading, is that if God feels the need to repeat something, it's probably important. Just saying. And if it's repeated many, many times, you really ought to start paying attention. So, and I think right now, in the world, we are facing an international crisis. We have a virus that's running rampant. We have a lot of positive things, a lot of things that makes us feel like we can get through this, that we can overcome whatever problems we face. But it's, it is still, it is a scary time. We have people, instead of working, staying in their homes, not being able to go out and work, and people walking around wearing masks, trying to keep more than 6 feet away from other people. And it is a scary time in that regard. We don't know if we're going to get sick. We don't know how that's going to affect us. There's just so much we don't know. And it is kind of a scary time. And these words just keep coming back to me, saying, if you don't keep God's commandments, you won't prosper in the land. And it seems like almost the cool thing to do nowadays. It's always been the cool thing to do to not keep God's commandments. That's always been a thing. But, it seems to escalate and escalate to the point where it's not just a matter of, hey, you're cool if you don't keep God's commandments. It's escalated to the point where society tells us that we're evil if we keep God's commandments. And it just seems like we get more and more evil. And not necessarily in kind of the obvious committing of sins and not following the commandments. It's not just beyond that, but in how people who do keep the commandments are treated. They're reviled. They're mocked. They're, just everyone just looks at them and laughs at them, makes fun of them, and it's a much, much different attitude than even in my lifetime when I was a kid. That just wasn't done. If you didn't believe, that was fine. If you did believe, that was fine too. It was a very much a live and let live type attitude. Everyone was responsible for themselves. And if they believed in God, or if they didn't believe in God, that was really on them. But now we seem to be moving past the point where if you have a strong belief, then it's mocked and reviled, and you are very much disregarded by the world. And so it seems to me that not just in America and throughout the world, but it does seem like in America it's more and more playing with fire because of that command, the one thing that's repeated in the Book of Mormon. If you keep my commandments, you will prosper in the land. If you do not keep my commandments, you will not prosper. It's pretty simple and straightforward, but it seems like we're, at America as a country, just kind of the entire American continent and world, has been pushing our luck for quite a while, and I don't think it's necessarily a good thing. And we have to remember this entire land, America, is, from the Book of Mormon, it states, all the people who came to America, who were guided by God to America, were given this land as a land of opportunity, a land of promise, as a gift from the Lord, as a promised land, a great land for everyone else. And, as someone who has given gifts that have not been well received, I know one of the worst things that I can feel when I give a gift that isn't well received, that is often disregarded or disliked or just simply not used. I feel bad when I give that gift. It's like, I worked hard. I picked out that gift. I made it, I tried to make it special and something that you would like, and you kind of just throw it away and disregard it. And I hasten to add that if we disregard a gift from God, he's not going to look too kindly upon us for doing that. And on a personal level, I do feel that this is a very important thing for all of us to remember at this time, that America, that this country, this land, wherever you are in it, even if you're not in the United States of America, anywhere in America, is an exceptional gift from God to pretty much all of us. And what we do with that gift, I think, will determine what happens to us. I honestly do believe that, and I think, yeah, just following that simple mantra I repeated, if you keep God's commandments, you will prosper in this land. If you do not keep God's commandments, you will not prosper. It's simple and straightforward, and I think it's a very important thing to remember. So, anyway, that is the Sunday school lesson. A bit late, but that's how life goes. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe if you like this, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.